Live from the mist-enshrouded mountaintop fortress that is X and Y Communications headquarters, you're listening to the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. And now, here's your host, Scott McKay.
Hello again, gentlemen, and welcome to yet another episode of the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. My name is Scott McKay, at Scott McKay on Twitter, at Scott McKay on Parler, Real Scott McKay on Instagram, Scott McKay on YouTube. The website, as always, is mountaintoppodcast.com. And I also invite you to join us, if you haven't already, on Facebook in the growing group for men of character, which is the Mountaintop Summit. With me today is a fellow OG, as it were, from the old pickup artist days, old school men's dating advice. Used to go by the name DJ Fuji. Yeah, you probably heard of him before from back in the day. Nowadays, you can call him Darren Fuji, and he is starting a brand new venture called Become Sharp, the title of which I already like, and I want to welcome him. DJ Darren Fuji, welcome, man.
Thank you, man. It's good to be here.
Yeah, man. You know, it's funny because I've known of you and you said likewise for years, and we've never really sat down and had a conversation before. And I don't know how that slipped through the cracks, but better late than never, right?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
And you came up with a really excellent topic. Just out of the blue, I asked you, hey, you know, what do you got going on that's exciting to you? What are your soapboxes, as it were, nowadays? And one of the ones that you threw down was discipline and work ethic, especially as it relates to attracting and relating to women. And I'm going to go ahead and let you riff on why that's important to you and see where this goes.
Yeah, so there's two main, ideas behind the idea of discipline and work ethic. And one is that for most of the guys that we coach, they're coming to us because they're struggling. And when you're struggling, you're behind the power curve naturally. As in, we see dating as very much a skill set. And it's a lot of social skills are called skills for a reason, because you develop them or you maybe haven't developed them. And so if you're behind the power curve, you're essentially below average in terms of social skill set. You need to exhibit a very great deal of discipline and work ethic just to get to even, and potentially to get above average, and essentially to be able to have the kind of dating life that you want. And so a lot of people don't see dating as a skill set. And so the idea of working hard for it seems foreign. Like, why do I have to work hard for it? Can't I just be me? And I would say, you know, if you're like me, I'm a 5'4" Asian guy. And if I was on the basketball court, you couldn't say, hey, why are you working so hard to play basketball? Just be you. Like, I can be me, and I'm going to suck at basketball. Like, I'm not a naturally talented basketball player, and I'm short. So skill set is skill set. And when you don't have that skill set, you have to work hard for it. So that's one way in which discipline and work ethic comes in. The second is that women are attracted to men that have drive and ambition. And a big part of that is discipline and work ethic. And so a lot of that idea comes from my training, my background as a Marine sergeant. And so obviously we are all about discipline. We're all about work ethic. And before that, I was a black belt. Before that, I was I did martial arts and stuff. And so discipline has always been a big part of kind of my life and what I've been about. And it's really what has allowed me to succeed, in spite of the fact that at its core, I'm a 5'4" Asian guy who's not classically good looking, trying to be competitive in this dating pool. And if anyone is in this spot, they know how difficult that can be. And the discipline and the work ethic are really what allowed me to be competitive and to be successful in that arena.
Yeah, you know, there isn't an easy button. And that's going to come as a complete utter shock to just about any guy who's consumed mainstream dating advice. And I would lump into what I call mainstream, much to the chagrin of many, the old pickup artist stuff. Because it was all about the easy button. Here are the 3 simple words you whisper in any woman's ear, and then you get laid. And it's like, you don't have to look good. You don't have to have any money. You can smell funny and have bad teeth, and women are just going to spread their legs anyway.
Right.
And it sells like hotcakes because of the promise that I don't have to change. I don't have to do anything. I don't have to have any real skills. These women, who we're inherently disrespecting, by the way, with this premise, are just going to be tricked into liking me. Right. Meanwhile, women, go figure, turn out to be actual real human beings, and they're not so easily fooled, and they have their own desires. They have their own goals that come from a relationship. Yet, similarly, in the women's dating world, you hear, hey, here are 3 obsession phrases you can whisper in a man's ear and get him to give you their credit card and never watch porn again.
Right.
So the whole world is obsessed with this easy button.
Yeah.
We don't even want to take the time to relate to each other anymore. I can just like your Facebook post here and there, and I've done my social dues with you. You and I are still friends. People will go to 4-year degrees, get doctorates for the sake of their career. They'll even go practice hitting golf balls on the golf range and spend lots of money on guitar lessons or painting lessons. But indeed, Darren, when it comes to getting better with women, they're thinking, hey, why can't I just be myself? And then they get frustrated when being themselves doesn't work. Yeah. Now, you mentioned something else. There's a lot to talk about here. You talked about how you could go on a basketball court, but you're still this short guy. And boy, can I relate to that. You and I basically see eye to eye. How's that? On lots of things, even literally.
You're right.
Now, as much as I practice, and I've actually used this exact example on this very show, I am never going to be the backup point guard for the San Antonio Spurs, my beloved Spurs. It isn't going to happen. I'm never going to be good enough for that. Yet, when it comes to attracting women, what most guys fail to realize is due to the way women process attraction, our ability to attract those women, especially the ones we would love to attract who, whether you want to say they look cute with us or they would be a good partner for us, whatever. It is much more within our grasp in terms of learning actual real world skills to become more attractive than it, say, is for a woman who's unfortunately not very physically attractive to get a guy. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's almost unfortunate in that sense because, biologically men are very visual and we're just evolutionarily, we're hardwired in a certain way. And when I coach women, it's difficult because sometimes they'll ask me, hey, why is it that, as a woman, men are just looking visually, but as a guy, women are looking for, all these different aspects. And it's a more nuanced, multifaceted thing. And that is our evolution. That is our biology. And there are obviously exceptions. That's a generalization. But in a general sense, there is some sort of, I would venture to say, privilege in the sense that as a guy, there's a lot of ceiling height. There's a lot of what you can do. I'm a 5'4" Asian guy. And, I'm in the best relationship of my life. And all that happens when I walk around is people assume I'm rich. Right? Or people just assume there's something wrong, like I paid for her. That is, granted, I've worked for that, but that is a kind of a testament to to what you can do with that work ethic, that discipline.
Yeah, I remember early on, I used to get emails asking if Emily was a paid actress. That's just impossible. I mean, her, come on, really? Right. And then I'd get all the schadenfreude from guys who probably are part of the red pill movement now, saying, oh, she's going to break up with you and take your entire fortune, whatever that means, and break your heart. One guy said famously and very laughably to my own wife when I showed it to her that she was going to run off with some member of Motley Crue. And that's not even her type of guy, far from it. Yeah. And it's funny because that kind of email, those kind of quote unquote well-wishers who weren't wishing me well at all, they kind of stopped writing about 10 years ago. And you and I were talking about the MGTOW movement and the red pill guys and how they don't really find a lot of pleasure in either your material or mine. Yeah. And, for my part, they kind of need me not to exist because first of all, my life was absolutely ruined by my first wife. So by all appearances, by anyone's estimation, I would have every right in the world to not like women and to swear them off. But instead of swearing at women, I swore to myself I was going to get better with women and not act like a victim and do what I could to be a better man, attract better women next time around. And I am now with the greatest woman I've ever met also, like you just said. And go figure. It's because I took the time, like you, to figure out what it was going to take to be more attractive, to be the kind of man women want, to understand women vis-a-vis the world telling us that's impossible. You can't even begin to do that. And then going out and making it happen over the course of several years. And that sounds to me like that's what your journey's been too, is putting your nose to the grindstone, figuring this stuff out, and voila, it pays off.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of just the idea of personal responsibility when things don't go right. And sometimes they won't. Sometimes that's just luck of the draw. You can either choose to be a victim or you can choose to do something about it. I was just listening to Jordan Peterson talk about, I don't know if it's the New Testament or the Old Testament, but he basically said when everything went wrong for the Jews, they had the opportunity to be a victim or they had the opportunity to look at it and say, what did we do wrong? And even if you didn't do anything wrong, even theoretically you did everything right and it still didn't work out, there is great power in giving yourself agency by saying, what did I do? What could I have done better? And it's not a mad thing of putting yourself down. And it's a very big thing on kind of what we work on with our guys is this idea of, hey, when something doesn't go right, you look to what you could do better. Because that agency is so, so important. Because if you rob yourself of that, then you're always going to be a victim.
I think that's a fascinating juxtaposition of faith and responsibility.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of folks who really are rather cynical towards religion or the idea of there being a supreme being would say, you're acting like a victim inherently by trusting in a higher being to rescue you or to save you when you should just rely on yourself and get the job done. Yet you're absolutely right. The redemption story of the Old Testament is a story of Israel messing up, repenting, God saving them, God blessing them, and when they turn their back on God again, getting sent into Babylonian captivity. And even, of course, the central story of the New Testament, which is the redemption story of the Christ figure, is based on, hey, you have a choice whether to accept or reject this blessing that's been handed to you by the Christian God, right? Mm-hmm. And it's up to you. You have a choice. That God doesn't force himself upon you. And that's something that people who haven't spent a lot of time really exegeting the scriptures or thinking about religion from a Judeo-Christian sense really think about or grasp, unless they've really dug deep. But that is actually the truth of how the scriptures are structured, is mankind isn't merely a pawn of the divine creator. We have agency.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think along with that, Darren, is the idea that, hey, we can't just sit around and wait for divine blessing without doing anything. One of the, a lot of times people think they're quoting scripture when they say God helps those who help themselves, when in reality, that's not scriptural. That's not in the Bible anywhere. Yet at the same time, what do human beings do with this agency? Why is Christianity tied to having discipline and having a work ethic? It's a natural outpouring of gratitude towards being here and being given the gift of life that we should want to make the most of it. Yet somehow, Darren, we live in a society now where everybody does want that easy button. They want to get as much from other people for doing as little as possible in return. And it seems almost epidemic. I mean, the millennials get a bad rap for this, but I think it's filtered up and down to the rest of society in general.
Yeah, I think that's what happens when everything becomes easy or everything becomes instant. No one is required to have patience. No one's required to, really, like, so many things that you had to work for before are now just at your fingertips. And there's some great, things about that. Just that the information that we have access to and with all the internet and all the opportunity, but there are drawbacks to that. And I think, we're seeing that with people's lack of patience, people's lack of ability to delay gratification. And, that has very long reaching consequences and implications. So, we're going to be experiencing that over the next few decades, but we're already seeing kind of those issues. We're already seeing those problems. And the people that overcome that realize that shortcoming and they overcome that and they work for that, they're going to be the next rulers. They're going to be the people that are successful as we move forward. And the people that don't are going to be the victims. They're going to be the people that fall by the wayside.
And a nice byproduct of that is you'll experience so much more personal fulfillment from having made your own way in the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's interesting is at the time we're recording this, we in the Western world perceive there to be a lot of strife and a lot of unrest going on. And indeed there is compared to what we're used to. That doesn't wipe out the fact that this is the absolute best time ever to be alive. You don't have to go and hunt and kill your food. You have shelter. Most of us in the Western world, even as we bitch and complain about what we're missing, we have that freedom to bitch and complain without someone shooting us in the head, summarily executing all of us for thinking that way, at least not yet. And we get to have a lot of fun. We get to do a lot of things that people just 20 years ago weren't able to do. The women are hotter and sexier later into their 40s and 50s than they ever were before. I mean, that alone is reason to rejoice. We're living longer. We're curing diseases. We look better. We feel healthier. By God, we even have the option to kill ourselves in various ways. You know, as Kinky Friedman said, find what you love and let it kill you. If that's drugs or alcohol or fast food, you have the freedom to do that. And yet people are still bitching and complaining and saying, yeah, well, whatever I got quickly, it wasn't enough. I want more.
Yeah.
I want people to pay my way. This whole COVID-19 thing is great. The government just sends me a check and I get to stay home. Why in the world would I want to go back to school? I mean, I think it's great that my classes are all going to be online. Let my parents or let the student loan system pay the bill for the exact same amount of the tuition. I get to basically watch porn while I'm in college now. This is freaking great. And I'll tell you where I'm most dismayed by what's going on. And I'm sure a lot of guys who are listening to what I'm saying are thinking, hey, you know what? It's kind of true. As things get easier, we get more complacent and then we complain more about what we don't yet have. Back when the lockdown started, which is now several months ago, I very happily and optimistically predicted that once we had been locked up, locked down, quarantined for 3 months, 4 months, people were going to be champing at the bit so hard to get out there and be social again that once the veil was lifted on all of this and people could go out, and even if the restaurants were open 25%, et cetera, people would just be absolutely thrilled to go out and socialize. The women would be perky and frisky and would want to come out and go out on dates with all sorts of guys. And people would realize, hey, all of this dysfunction that had been caused by dating apps and other myriad ways that have caused us to think we're socializing when we're really not. People are going to wake the hell up and go, I want real people. I want real socializing again. And Darren, to my dismay, I think the women are all at home with their cats. And men are all at home with Pornhub, and it's become even more of an entrenched habit than it was before.
Yeah, I'm seeing the same thing.
Easy button.
Part of it is, at least for us, in California, it never really got to safe, right? We never really got it under control to the point where everyone could relax and there was a vaccine. So that's coming later. But yeah, I think, we're looking at a generation now of everything being easy, everything being essentially antisocial. Like the new generation of both men and women are terrified to talk on the phone. Like the idea of calling and making a reservation terrifies kids. And when I say kids, I don't mean 10-year-olds. I mean people in their 20s. And it's just because there wasn't that requirement when they were growing up. And unless you had parents that really, really forced that, you have a generation of kids that are used to texting and not used to being in real life conversations. And we're seeing the repercussions of that.
I'm reminded of the old John Hughes movie from the 80s called The Breakfast Club. And the premise there, if you've never seen the movie before, it's one of those classic 80 movies with Molly Ringwald in it. They all have Molly Ringwald and Ali Sheedy, all of them. And they're all holed up in Saturday morning detention together. And the kids couldn't be any different from each other. Okay?
Yeah.
And the dorky kid, who's played by an actor named Anthony Michael Hall, who was always the dorky kid. If you've seen 16 Candles, he was the dorky kid in that movie also, is bragging or crowing or whatever about how he's in chess club. And the other kid, one of the girls, is like, yeah, that's not being social. And, the guy who's like the cool guy who's a little rough around the edges is like, well, come on now. It's kind of social, demented and sad, but social. And that became one of the catchphrases from the movie for all of us who were in high school at the time. And that's what I'm reminded of. People think they're being social, but it's just demented and sad. And I'll give you an example. I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but someone introduced me to a potential guest for this show who was a millennial expert. And when you look at their website, it was like, hey, there's this mythical representation of millennials as being entitled and lazy and not making much effort to be social, blah, blah, blah. And I promise I'm not making this up. Shortly after the introduction was made, when I say shortly, I mean like a day and a half, I got an email. I mean, listen, now let me premise this by saying I'm not an ivory tower kind of guy, right? And just about everybody I've ever met who had real notoriety, I corresponded with them back and forth. When people are trying to make it as if you're hearing from the assistant to their assistant for public relations, it's probably them on the end of their own computer, okay, trying to look like they're important. A friend of mine calls it the illusion of empire, right? Mm. So I get an email from this person's assistant saying, we need to lock this down in the next 24 to 48 hours. Come on, let's make it happen. And I just didn't answer it. But in my mind, I laughed out loud because I don't think this guy even realizes he's acting exactly the way he's saying it's mythical that millennial guys act. And it's like, you just did that very thing to me. You just emailed a guy you don't even know who would theoretically give you a platform to talk to 30,000 guys and sell your book to. And you're making this assumption arrogantly that I'm going to have you on the show. And by the way, you need to fit my schedule or we're not going to do this thing. I was just like, homie, don't play that, And I wondered aloud to my wife, I said, do these people not even realize the reality of what that perception actually entails? I mean, clearly in my mind, they're thinking that this idea of being entitled and arrogant and presumptuous and lazy is at some other level than what they're acting at, And I couldn't help but also think, lest I start sounding too uppity or arrogant myself here, I wonder what the World War II generation thinks of me and you, Darren, as we're sitting here talking about, oh yeah, discipline and work ethic. I bet you those 90-year-old codgers are going, you mofos don't know the first thing about discipline and work ethic. And you know what? I bet they're right. I think as we progress in society, as the years have rolled on, I think we're all thinking, we're basically one step below Jocko Willink, when in reality, we're about 40 steps below our own grandparents.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. I was talking to my dad recently, and I was asking him, my dad's 70-something, and I was asking him, as bad as our generation is, my generation and the one after that and the one after that, it looks like everything's kind of imploding and everything, and there's all these issues. How does that look from your perspective? Like, are we any worse from your perspective than I'm sure you were for my grandparents' generation? And my dad actually said something interesting. He said, my father was the greatest generation. It was that generation, the World War II generation. And he was in the army during World War II. And he said he looked to us, to the boomers, and in exactly the same way that your generation looks to me, and exactly the same way that you will look at, say, Gen Y or Gen Z or whatever. And he said it feels much worse for your situation, but it's probably no different than every succeeding generation. But if you compare, obviously Gen Z to the boomers, there's going to be a very big difference. Just like if you go back 100 years, 200 years, you're going to see warriors. You're going to see, you're going to see a very, very big gap between the two. But the flip side, though, is that progressively, we have a lot more, say, independence and freedoms and a lot of advantages that have happened over the years, scientifically and otherwise as well. So, it's a mixed bag.
Sure. Yet from the human perspective, the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Right. Yeah.
So tell me, Darren, how are these guys going to bridge the gap? If a guy is saying to himself, yeah, you know what? I think I could get an easy advantage over other guys out there by actually rolling up my sleeves, getting some discipline into my life and getting to work on myself and how attractive I am to women. Where would you tell them to start? Because I know from learning how to surf and learning how to play guitar and other things that have admittedly caused a modicum of effort, at least to get started with, a lot of times we're most likely to throw up our hands and quit during those first few days or weeks of frustration. What are some good, solid first steps guys can take to build this work ethic and increase their discipline and actually maybe feel good about it and see some results?
I'm going to take a page actually from Jordan Peterson again. He talks a lot about you have to essentially lower your standards. And what that means is not lower your dreams, but he means to get started. So many people want to get started with some big accomplishment. And they don't, their ego gets in the way and they want to have some big success that they can celebrate on day one. And he said, that's not how it works. Like any skill, if you think about it, is developed by making very, very small incremental successes or achievements and then doing that consistently. So in the gym, you don't start off not being able to bench the bar and throwing 300 pounds on it and then dropping it through your chest. You do that by going a little bit more difficult than what you can do and then consistently ratcheting that up. So I think when it comes to, this is especially bad when it comes to dating and interacting with women and relationships. If you're not good at it, the same way that I was years and years ago, I was the kid who, in high school, I'd never held a girl's hand. Even in college, I'd never held a girl's hand, much less kissed, much less had sex or anything. I was the dork of the dorks. The only reason I didn't get picked on is because I had a martial arts background. But I was so dorky that despite a martial arts and a varsity wrestling background, people still didn't want to have anything to do with me. So coming from that perspective where even with that background, even with being a Marine and people, I just still couldn't get a date. I couldn't anything. And it was because I lacked social skills. It was because I lacked a lot of the basic conversational skills that we take for granted a lot of times. If you just happen to have them naturally, organically, I didn't have that opportunity. I was at home studying and I was at home playing video games and programming computers and doing those things. And that gave me a great career, but it also came at the expense of any kind of social life. And so the way I did that is by buckling down and really using that discipline, that work ethic that I got from the Marine Corps and realizing, hey, this is a skill. And like every other skill that I've ever learned, even at a disadvantage, the way I learned the skill is by going through figuring out where I'm bad or where I need to get better or where I need to improve, and then incrementally improving, challenging myself, not giving up, and also looking for help, looking for mentors, looking for coaches, looking for people that will assist me on that journey. And a lot of people think, oh, if you had a boxing book on your coffee table and they're like, oh, you're learning to box, that's awesome. But if you had a book about social skills on your coffee table, everyone all of a sudden looks down at you. All of a sudden everyone's like, why? Why are you doing that? And it's because at its core, society is still not accepted that social skills, despite their name, are skills. And that acceptance that, hey, these are skills and I'm going to work on them despite other people maybe looking down on them or other people not agreeing, that's what's going to separate the men from the boys, the people that succeed from those that just kind of wallow by the wayside and play the victim mentality and then never get anywhere.
Or you could just call it NLP and make it all scientific and cover it all up.
Yes.
Now you're smart and erudite for studying this stuff.
Yeah.
Well, that kind of brings us back full circle. Indeed, a lot of guys think that they can and should practice all these other things in life, yet when it comes to getting the women they want in their life, being more attractive, they just decide to wing it. And indeed, we've talked at length on this very show about that idea of small successes leading to big successes. And it's just like you said, you can't walk into the gym as a skinny kid and say, I want to be the next Lou Ferrigno or Arnold Schwarzenegger and then expect to succeed, because you're never going to have anything you can celebrate until you're at the very top.
Yes.
I, like you, have gotten the emails from guys who have never talked to a woman in their entire life saying, how do I stop a supermodel on the street in New York while she's walking 10 dogs and has headphones on? I was like, I don't know. I've never tried that before, but why don't we start with the cute little gal who sits next to you in Psych 101? That'd be a good place to start. And they're like, well, Absolutely. That'd be too easy. Well, then go do it. So I think for a lot of guys, a little goes a long way. I love the advice of making a goal that's reachable, SMART goals. Everybody's heard of those before. But that idea of setting a baby step that you can feel good about reaching and letting that be a stepping stone to something bigger. Hey, before you know it, you're going to have the women in your life you really wanted, and it will have been a series of small steps that you can celebrate along the way. Love it. And I'd also love to send these guys to your website, which is called Become Sharp. And to do that, these guys can go to mountaintoppodcast.com/Fuji, just like Mount Fuji, F-U-J-I. That's such a cool name. Darren.
Thanks.
Well, Fuji's a cool mountain. Have you ever been? Have you ever seen it?
I have not, actually.
You need to go. You need to go and stay until there's a clear day where you can see the thing.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. It's just big fun. And when you guys go to mountaintoppodcast.com/Fuji and check out Become Sharp, you'll see everything that Darren's up to, including his brand new brand. And if you've known Darren from way back in the day, prepare to be surprised at the direction he's taking and the new innovative things he's come up with. Darren, what a pleasure. I'm glad we finally got a chance to connect. And thank you so much for being on.
Yeah, thank you very much, Scott. Likewise, and I appreciate the opportunity and getting to connect and talk shop.
Yeah, I think we're coming from the right place. We're two guys who have been in the depths before when it comes to not really being all that great with women. And we've seen the light at the end of the tunnel, emerge from it, and found ourselves saying, wow, it's really bright out here after all. It's a great place to be. And I know you're a kindred spirit in that regard, and I appreciate it immensely. So guys, have you gone to mountaintoppodcast.com yet? One of the things I don't talk about enough is how you can download free reports, including one on how to get your sticking points solved with women. And that's what I want to focus on talking about today. It is a complete book that you can use as a reference guide. And it's got a table of contents. All you do is look up the sticking point that you have and read a clear, balanced solution to getting it handled in your life. As always, you can talk to me for free for 25 minutes anytime you want. And why not go through Sticking Points Solved? See what that book does for you. And if you have anything that's still kind of a sticking point, sign up to talk to me using the red button in the upper right-hand corner at Mountaintop Podcast. You'll find I'm exactly the guy you think I am, and we'll work out a plan to get your life to where you want it to be. Hey, it may not be an easy button, but it all starts with that red button in the upper right-hand corner. You get a plan of action in place. You start seeing results where there were none before. You'll be more energized than ever, and before you know it, you'll be a machine. It's all there for you at mountaintoppodcast.com. And until I talk to you guys again real soon, this is Scott McKay from X&Y Communications in San Antonio, Texas. Be good out there.
The Mountaintop Podcast is produced by X&Y Communications. All rights reserved worldwide. Be sure to visit www.mountaintoppodcast.com for show notes. And while you're there, sign up for the free X&Y Communications newsletter for men. This is Ed Roy Odom speaking for the Mountaintop Podcast.